Tonight on Reporting Scotland, an Amazon depot in Inverclyde is closed for 9 hours after bomb disposal experts are called to deal with a suspicious package. A man's found guilty of raping a 14-year-old girl who thought he'd stopped to help her when her bike got a flat tyre. The campaign to help farmers recognise the signs when their mental health begins to deteriorate.
I was quite lucky compared to some. I never really got the length of being suicidal. But I feel that, had I let it go on, I really could have come to that stage.
Also on the programme, we look ahead to the weekend's League Cup semi-finals with Hibs, Rangers, Celtic and Motherwell bidding for glory. And he's the Scottish photographer who's met some of the world's most famous people. For now, a new retrospective reflects on Harry Benson's early career. Hello, good evening. Bomb disposal experts were called to the Amazon depot in Gourock after a suspicious package was found early this morning. A man's been convicted of raping a 14-year-old girl in a car park behind a supermarket in East Renfrewshire. At the High Court in Glasgow, the trial of a mother accused of murdering her toddler daughter has heard she told her sister-in-law that she laid the infant on a bed, then took a pillow and put it on her face. The next steps in setting up a national investment bank for Scotland have been announced. The First Minister said a public consultation will be held to hear the public's views as the Scottish Government attempts to boost growth. The Conservatives say this is simply designed to deflect from what they call the mess the government's making of the economy. Here's our political correspondent Andrew Kerr.
It's not a piece of cake trying to grow the economy. Investment is key to help your business, something this new vegan cafe in Glasgow struggled with.
We were turned down again and again. We had to provide lots and lots of information. We had equity behind us in a house. We were told even with that they weren't going to take the risk. So basically we had to fund the whole place ourselves.
The point of a national investment bank is to perk up the economy and see significant growth. This enterprise might be a bit small for the big projects that could be funded, but at a conference on inclusive growth, the First Minister said she wants to hear from the public about the scale and scope of such an institution.
Today, of course, that work takes a step forward with the launch of a consultation, not on the principle of an investment bank, but on the details of how that bank would operate in a way to fulfil those aims.
The Conservatives aren't impressed, though.
I actually think that the announcement that we've had on this is just to deflect actually from the mess that the SNP are making of the economy. About 7 years ago we had an announcement on a Scottish Business Development Bank and we've seen nothing come from that.
Attention is focused on growing the economy, but how do you do that in a fair and inclusive way? That was the point of the discussion here. Perhaps higher taxes could be one answer.
The research that we've done shows that, in fact, tax rates could be increased at the top levels without necessarily having a negative impact on growth.
Apart from the Conservatives, there seems to be a consensus among Scotland's political parties for tax rises. But of course, business leaders have their concerns.
I think the evidence is that individual taxation can be a disincentive to people starting businesses and growing businesses. So any tax increases need to be measured very, very carefully on their potential impact.
Back to business in the cafe, ministers are considering serving up substantial changes to tax bands to fund public services. They're looking around for a willing partner to buy into their budget. It's a hot topic that will be debated at the Scottish Green Party conference this weekend. Andrew Kerr, Reporting Scotland.
A campaign to raise awareness of mental health issues experienced by young farmers in Scotland has been recognised nationally. The President of the European Council, Donald Tusk, has said the leaders of the remaining 27 EU states have agreed to discuss a trade deal with Britain among themselves. The Prime Minister, Theresa May, said she remains positive, but there was still more to be done to secure a deep and special partnership. Well, our business and economy editor, Douglas Fraser, is in Brussels for us. So, Douglas, just what do you think Theresa May has achieved this week?
Well, no deal by the deadline that had been set for the summit of government leaders in Brussels this week. But the Prime Minister did avoid humiliation, at least. And I think she's changed the tone of the debate a bit. There were warm words, talk of goodwill on both sides, a bit more momentum and shared hopes for a breakthrough. She didn't leave Brussels empty-handed. The other 27 members of the European Union, as you say, they agreed to start preparation for talks with the United Kingdom on future relations with the UK. But it's only preparation. They don't want to give ground to the British government negotiators on the early part of the negotiation, and particularly on the question of how much money Britain pays. That's why there was no deal by this week's deadline. But nor did they want to send the British Prime Minister away humiliated, given that they know how weak she is at Westminster, and they don't want a replacement of the Prime Minister, perhaps with another Conservative leader who might be more belligerent in these negotiations.
So Douglas, what does this mean for business?
Well, the delay in getting to a discussion of the future trading relationship is particularly frustrating, and it's dismaying for a lot of businesses, international businesses. There's a chill on inward investment. That matters in particular for Scotland, which ranks second only to London in terms of its success at attracting inward investment from foreign companies. For the United States investing in the European Union, 60% of that comes to Britain. Scotland does very well out of that, and that brings jobs and export gains, productivity improvements which spread right through the economy. And we're hearing today also about companies making plans for an economic shock, for some building up stocks or looking for new sources of the skills they need. In the finance sector, firms there are already going further. They're making moves to protect what they see as the interests of shareholders and customers by relocating at least some jobs outside of the UK into other European countries, so that they can stay within the European single market in future. So from the finance sector today, a warning that they can take their foot off the accelerator of that process if the transition deal becomes a bit clearer much sooner than it seems to be doing at the moment. While they say they're hoping for the best, they're planning for the worst.
Douglas, many thanks. A double-decker bus became wedged under a bridge in Aberdeen this afternoon. The accident happened on Riverside Drive at the Wellington Suspension Bridge. No passengers on the bus were injured and the bridge was not damaged. The Defence Secretary, Sir Michael Fallon, has said no other industry has as much certainty as shipbuilding on the Clyde as he moved to allay union concerns over future Navy orders, with work on a new Type 31E frigate to be open to bids from around the UK. The Unite Union said it was not sure it could trust the government promises on future orders. Here's our business correspondent, David Henderson.
It's what the government might call the drumbeat of shipbuilding on the Clyde, as a military band welcomed the UK's latest warship, HMS Medway, at an official naming ceremony.
May God bless her and all who sail in her.
But is the party already over for shipbuilders here, with no future guarantees that this yard will win contracts? Beyond those, it's already signed. The Defence Secretary told me, no, you won't find a better deal.
The Clyde is turning out frigates. I cut steel on the first one back in July, HMS Glasgow. There will be 7 other heavy frigates. That's 20 years' worth of work. There's no other industry in Britain that has such certainty.
But the way the Royal Navy's buying its warships has changed. Yards right around the UK are now being offered the chance to bid for work, as they did when the aircraft carriers were built in sections. The aim, less cost to the taxpayer and more ships to sell to foreign navies. Union leaders say it's a cunning plan, but a botched one.
Well, it won't deliver because I think Michael Fallon's had a flashback to the 1980s when we had this policy, when we had internal competition in complex naval ships within the UK, and it led to one thing, and that was unfortunately shipyards going bust and almost taking the whole shipbuilding industry down with them. So to revisit a policy that's absolutely failed before beggars belief to us.
So how does the company which runs this yard sustain a life on the ocean waves? Well, it wants to team up with Camel Laird shipbuilders on Merseyside in a bid to win those future contracts. But as uncertainty looms on the horizon, this drumbeat may have to change. David Henderson, reporting Scotland, Glasgow.
Scotland didn't back Brexit in the referendum, but our Remain voting nation has not been uncritical of the EU. And however Brexit turns out, there may be some aspects of life in the Union that won't be much missed. Our political correspondent Glenn Campbell has been taking a look.
Many in our fishing communities hope Brexit will allow them to land a bigger share of the UK catch. The EU quota system's long been a source of frustration in Scotland, and it's not the only one. In fact, you don't have to trawl around very much to find examples of things the Scottish Government has said it would if it could, but can't do because of EU rules. Take student fees. Students from EU countries outside the UK, like this group at Strathclyde University, can't be charged tuition fees. The EU insists they're treated the same as students from Scotland, who get their fees paid by the government, at an additional cost of £28 million a year.
How big a factor was no tuition in Scotland for you deciding to come here?
I think it was the biggest factor. I mean, if my family had to cover the tuition fees, then I wouldn't be here.
Because Scotland offered no tuition fees for the same quality course, I decided to go to Scotland.
Minimum unit pricing for alcohol hasn't been blocked by the European Commission, but EU law has allowed the whisky industry to delay the measure by fighting it in the courts for the past 5 years.
The 5-year wait has been a frustration, and if that 5-year wait was 3 years, that would have been better than a 5-year wait. But we have no information on, no knowledge of what the future structure is going to be. But we would have liked to have seen the measure come in more quickly.
When it comes to ferries, publicly owned CalMac had to see off commercial competition to keep serving the Hebrides and Clyde Islands. Unions want to end the requirement to put the next contract out to tender.
I think overall leaving the EU will have a positive impact. And with regards to ferry tendering, it's creating uncertainty for the workforce, it's created uncertainty for the islanders, and it's a total waste of money where every 6 years or so millions of pounds are spent on a tendering process when we believe it should just be in public ownership.
Brexit does have the potential to bring change in all these areas. It might also make it possible for Holyrood to take control of setting VAT rates, to renew air departure tax exemptions for Highland airports, and to make paying the living wage a condition of public sector contracts. But we can't be sure. The extent to which EU influence is swept away by Brexit will depend on the ebb and flow of negotiations. The UK might agree to keep some things the same to secure a good trade deal with the EU. And where it does not, it will have to create rules of its own. In any event, Scottish ministers are convinced Brexit will be bad.
Do you accept there are some opportunities for the Scottish Government in Brexit?
I have to say I see no benefit that outweighs the significant negative impact that we would see from Brexit, the loss of jobs, the loss to the economy, and indeed the loss of skills. So I don't see any benefit that outweighs the negatives at all.
Whether you fear Brexit or not, it will certainly bring change. Glenn Campbell, reporting Scotland.
Now it's League Cup semi-final weekend at Hampden Park with the Scotland and Edinburgh rugby player John Hardy has been suspended pending an investigation. I should have done better. That's the verdict of the world-renowned Scottish photographer Harry Benson on his own work. And that's Reporting Scotland for now. I'll be back with the headlines at 8, and then Christopher and I will have the late bulletin just after the 10 o'clock news. Until then, from all of us on the team right around the country, have a great evening. Bye-bye for now.